initially planned. We got here. Creaky chair. Okay, it's 5 o'clock. Well, welcome to the Spatial University Symposium 2021. This is the first ever and possibly only virtual Spatial University Symposium that the University of Redlands will have. Last year we had to cancel our symposium because it came right in the transition period when the pandemic was taking hold, and we were starting to realize how many restrictions we were going to have. So it's just so wonderful to be here this year, to be able to share the work that's being done by students, faculty, and administrators at the University of Redlands, and to just get together and see each other and talk a little bit. The agenda today is that we will have lightning talks first for the first hour and a half. And then we will have a very short visit by Addie, the bulldog. And then presentations of awards and honors to undergraduate and graduate students at the university. Our featured keynote address by Jim and Tis Sandos, and then the announcement of the favorite poster and story maps. So we encourage you to go to the Symposium website, which I forgot to make a slide for, but if someone could type maybe Lisa, if you could put the URL into the chat of where people can go see the story maps and vote. I don't want you to divide your time between looking at story maps and listening to the wonderful presentations tonight, but we'd like you to go and vote for your favorites. We've had really good participation today. Last time I looked, we were up close to 100 votes, and we're very happy to see that level of interest in the gallery. Let me see, go next. I did want to state, and this was sort of a reminder to myself to get it started, but we are live streaming this presentation on facebook.com. If folks, if you have friends who don't necessarily want to deal, friends or family, relatives who don't want to deal with WebEx, you can send them to this page and they can track the events going on. All right, we will go to our lightning talks. Encourage you to to keep muted during the presentations, but post questions for the presenters in chat. And if we can, we'll open up people unmute people so they can talk to each other if time allows us to do that. So we're going to go to the first talk here. Let me get Mapping Histories of Race in the Inland Empire with Mackenzie Nelson, Will Block, and Jen Tilton. So if you guys can unmute yourself, I will share my and I can take over sharing and go at it.
Well, hello, and thank you for joining us today. I graduated from the GIS Master's program this winter, and Mackenzie Nelson is graduating from Johnston this month. We are members of the Historical Census and the ID Project. This has been a fun and challenging undertaking that we're excited to share with y'all.
We are digitizing historic census data for the Inland Empire from the years 1900 to 1970, so we can map patterns of racial segregation, immigration, and settlement in the early 20th century.
For this region, we don't have redlining maps or georeferenced census data before 1960. So we only have fragmentary information about when and how racial segregation in housing developed, and it has been difficult to see trends until now.
We have used historic census data from IPUNs from the University of Minnesota, historical census maps, and other local historical sources to draw enumeration districts for each decade.
Our goal is to create a publicly accessible geospatial database so scholars, students, and residents can map changing patterns of segregation, home ownership, migration, and settlement.
And this is a collaborative project between Dr. Jennifer Tilton, the Race and Ethnic Studies Department, the Center for Spatial Studies, the Public History program at UCR, which is funded by the Relevancy and History Project partnership with California State Parks. So this is IPUMS, which stands for Integrated Public Use Microdata, and this is a database developed by the University of Minnesota where we retrieve the census data. They digitize all the raw files of publicly released census data. So here is our variable selection screen. Here we select variables that we're interested in, and we can package them to be downloaded. As you can see, there are many variables available on IPUMS, and some of the variables that we were interested in studying included race, homeownership, and birthplace. And to help with our database management, we download the variables from IPUMS into Stata, where we're able to view the data in a spreadsheet. And after downloading our data for all the decades from 1900 to 1940, we had over 18 million records of data. We organize data records into frequencies, and then we then use this data to build pivot tables and unique identifiers, as Will is going to explain.
Will, you're muted.
Sorry. Having this data in digital form is only the first step. Now, two important pieces need to be constructed in order for this massive amount of data to integrate properly into a geospatial environment. Firstly, a unique ID for each enumeration district, or ED, needs to be created. Since these EDs change drastically over time, they need to be connected to their corresponding decade, which is how we constructed this number here. Secondly, we need to create concatenated variables in order to calculate accurate frequencies of areas of interactive interest, such as race and homeownership. With these two calculations created, this massive amount of data can be pivoted and transformed into a format that Pro will accept. After bringing this newly organized dataset into Pro, we get something like this. Now the data is starting to look like something that is easier to digest, but this is still only half the battle.
To digitize these enumeration districts, we utilize historic maps and enumeration district descriptions to cross-reference where we should put these districts on our maps. And this was challenging at times because, as you can see, these maps don't always have the best quality, as you can see on the left of the slide. The descriptions are vague, and any helpful handwritten notes written in the margins are lost due to time. So sometimes we get description that works, like the one on the left that says Redlands, that part bounded by city limits, East Colton Ave, and includes the University of Redlands, the hospital, and the church. But then other times we get descriptions like the one on the left, which just says Cucamonga Township, Mennonite, illegible and taped. So sometimes we have to do additional research to find out where these districts actually are.
Unmute.
I'm so sorry. When the description is unclear and the map is cluttered, we turn to historical documents such as charters, newspapers, voting, and school precinct information in order to fill in the gaps and draw as accurately as possible. Now with the geometry created and the data transformed, we can combine these pieces using the unique IDs created to create maps such as these.
So these maps on this slide show how the Black population in the Inland Empire grew in the first half of the 20th century. We can also see that segregation increased through the decades, with Black populations increasingly confined to the eastern side of Riverside. These maps show the result of systematic discrimination by real estate agents, banks, and FHA policies, the ways that race was built into the geography that we live in. And right now, we're using this data to create maps in Dr. Tilton's Black History of the Inland Empire class. But we have a rich database that other scholars and students can use to explore more questions, such as, what are the patterns of Mexican immigration throughout time in the region? How did Black and homeownership rates change over the 20th century compared to white rates of homeownership?
These maps and the information they portray are only the tip of what can be seen through this sort of spatial lens. We can see here by 1960 that patterns of racial segregation have hardened further. Black residents are even more concentrated on the east side, which became a majority Black and Mexican neighborhood that was segregated from most of white Riverside by the freeway. We are in the early stages of working to develop a web app to provide an accessible interface for students and scholars alike. In its final form, we hope it can host all of this data in a public app so the community can explore patterns of immigration, homeownership, education for all racial and ethnic groups across the decades. This census mapping project is one piece of a broader effort called Mapping a People's History of the Inland Empire that aims to develop maps and stories of the diverse communities of the Inland Empire. We are also using existing community archives to georeference historic locations of businesses, early residents, and community institutions. We use both these kinds of maps to develop story maps that will tell the stories of how people of color built thriving communities and businesses and how racism and segregation have shaped the development of our region in the past and present. We are eager to collaborate with you and other researchers and institutions on this digital mapping project and to share our mapping sources as they come online. So please reach out. Thank you.
It feels weird without applause. Thank you very much. Do we have a few minutes for questions? Does anyone want to unmute and ask a question?
Sure, I'll ask a question, Steve. Let me turn my camera
Sure.
back on. I was looking at a website for old photos that had some similarities to this, and they had the ability to sort of animate it through time, and it looks like you're getting very close to that. Is that a goal, to be able to see these changes? And I know some of the cool stuff that Johannes did with like mortgages tanking in the '08 recession. So it seems like you've really got a nice potential here to show this sort of shift, and that although we think we've desegregated, we really haven't. Can you talk about that a little bit, about how to help us visualize what's really going on here over time or not going on?
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, ideally, we do want to include some sort of timeline possibility within the app. Also, tools like a spyglass to be able to peer through the different layers and different decades to better understand how these trends that are being mapped affect both the past and present. That is definitely built into the process. And
I would just add that that's definitely a long-term goal, but like the details, that it is so complicated. And so it's so much work to just chase down the historical details to try. So we have a lot of kind of problem-solving work to do before we can get to that point of the super cool public visualization. But I think that would be great.
You're chewing through your Esri credits by the billions, I bet, with that big a database. I got a little tiny one by comparison, and I know how that goes. Nice work.
Oh, Jim, you've been very good at using credits. Any other questions? We have like a minute.
I do have a question, which is, will this information, this map that you have created, will this be shared with policymakers?
So I'll take that. So I think that, the story maps and the public maps that we create, I think that is the goal, is to share them, yes, with policymakers, and can maybe have them be part of the conversation about what it means, say, to take racism as a public health issue in San Bernardino, but also to share them with high school students, right? So I think one of our goals is actually to think about how we can bring some of this material into local high schools as they develop ethnic studies curriculum, so that young people can think about the history of how these dynamics play out right where they live. And so we've got this kind of bigger collaboration of people, including some teachers and a lot of kind of community organizations, trying to think about what that might look like as we move forward.
Thank you.
Okay, well, it's time to move on to the next talk, Geospatial Business Incubator, blending GIS and startup launch to grow new businesses in the Inland Empire, with Jim Spee, Rudy Arvizo, and Daniel Bonomo. Take it away.
All right, this is a senior project by Daniel and Rudy. Rudy's still at work. He's actually working in the department at Esri that gave me the idea for this. So Daniel was his classmate, and he's going to start off, and we're going to trade off a little bit. So I'm going to turn it over to him. Daniel, you might want to introduce yourself.
Cool.
I'm Jim Spee. I'm a professor in the School of Business.
Yeah, so hi there. My name is Daniel Bonomo, and I had the pleasure of having Professor Spee as my instructor for a class recently. And yeah, we basically just dove into this project and found that it seems like it's pretty interesting for folks. So Yeah, so basically we identified that there's a generalized social problem with GIS as an industry, that there's a lot of K through 12 education that's completely leaving out GIS curriculum throughout the entire experience, all the way up through high school. And even don't include much in the GIS curriculums. There's also a need for some social sustainability. These jobs are being lost to automation over time, and we really need to be sourcing new solutions for these folks as these changes are being felt. There's also a huge or large underrepresentation for minority students in STEM and GIS especially, and in business ownership. We'd like to try to stimulate that. And in general, most small businesses especially, but just businesses in general are really missing out on the benefit of GIS. So there's a thread throughout the whole dialogue that needs to be sort of boosted, in our opinion. Can you go to the next slide, please? Thank you.
Sure, I'll take this one. So last fall, with an MBA grad, Natalie Boehm, we researched K-12 programs in career and technical education. And what we didn't ask about GIS, we did ask about entrepreneurship, but we've talked to some other people that Steve Moore put us in contact with, and both of these fields have a problem. There's very few qualified instructors in the K-12 world that have both one or either of these qualifications. If they're an entrepreneur, they're out running a business. If they know GIS, they have a GIS job. Mentors are also really hard to find. Finding somebody with an existing business to talk to them. And this is what the teachers are telling us. The other thing they told us was that the K-12 schedules are just packed, just like us. There's too many things going on already. So if you're already in a STEM career path, you're in a career tech path, there's just no room for extra courses, and certainly not for an entire GIS program, and not for an entire entrepreneurship program. The cool thing, though, to our advantage is that the state standards say that especially career and tech programs are supposed to include learning about all the aspects of an industry. Well, GIS has applications in every possible industry that they teach, and I cross-mapped it. My wife, Paige, works with Daniel at Esri, and they have a web page for every industry that uses GIS, and they match these programs. So they're not doing entrepreneurship, they're not doing GIS, but they're doing the industries. We think we can help them. Daniel, back to you.
Thanks. So our solution is to develop a remote first GIS and entrepreneurship educational program. Really, this is designed to be available for anybody. We want to encourage anyone to come to this, but we're going to be really focusing on high school and post-secondary programs that are serving minority and disadvantaged populations. So, high schools, colleges, and also startup programs that want to add this as a piece. So we want to provide an educational foundation to really kickstart that geospatial thinking, to plant the seeds that can grow later on into a bigger idea or a desire to get really into this. And so the idea is to really assist these folks in either designing or deciding that this is a career they wanted to go into. And if they have a business idea, to help them validate the idea and work out all the issues that you might come into with starting with an idea and actually making it into a business. So overall, it's going to be composed of three major components. There's an educational component, which is basically a mini GIS curriculum, and with an entrepreneurial side to it. So if you've got a very strong entrepreneur background, we're going to teach you about GIS. If you've got a strong GIS background, we're going to teach you about the entrepreneurial side that you'll need to keep the rubber on the road as far as your business goes. This is also needs to be partnered with like a mentorship or a partnership program. So our goal is to go out and source a number of mentorships and partners that people can start working with, and to match up the GIS experts with the entrepreneur experts, so to hopefully start combining those folks together and help them build these businesses. And then finally, we want to build a community. We want to make this into something that can provide a network for folks to come back to time and again, to bring their resources to, and to maybe even come back later on and be a mentor for them on their own.
Yeah, I just want to mention, thanks, Steve, for connecting us with his colleagues at Northwestern and at George Mason, who've done the GIS chunk of this. We found a business partner of Esri's who's done the small business startup with the GIS intersect. The only piece now is to add a couple more elements, and we've got some potential partnerships that'll make that really successful. The county has the county's district of schools has a mentoring network already built up, and the community college just bought one, but they don't have people to feed into it. So that'll be and when I talk to Steve's friends at these other schools, they're like, you live in Redlands, you've got GIS people all over the place. I said, well, we know how to find them. So that's our strength. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, so we feel that we've got a strong platform because we really don't need the schools to replace their STEM programs. We can really enhance what they've got on the side. And we can benefit companies of any size or level of GIS interest. So that's from the small businesses, the mom and pops that just need to do this once or maybe once a quarter to make a marketing plan or, design legit or decide where to place their store or that kind of thing. Or, if you're a business that's got GIS as a larger component, we can help you with that. And if you're a company or a person with a startup idea, we can really help you hone that to the point where you can provide your GIS product as a service, where you're actually providing the GIS portion of it as your actual product. So we feel that this could have implications from all levels of application. So go ahead.
Oh, the really cool thing is if you decide to go with that third option, Esri will make you a startup partner and give you free access to their software.
Yeah,
so
thanks.
You get
company. Yeah. So, and then the idea is to partner with these startup programs and be basically an on-ramp for that too. We can help vet them and get them, stood up to the point where a partnership program will be happy to take them. So, and I think a lot of us here probably know exactly what the business benefits of GIS are all about. So I don't have to spend a lot of time on this slide, but they're great for making location analysis, for targeting, marketing, site selection, that kind of thing. So, overall, we've got a number of steps that we need to take further since this is really still conceptual and still doing some research. So just working on, curriculum, grant applications, partnering with the schools, and then, finding the mentors, hiring, and starting actually teaching. That's the plan here. So.
Yeah, that's it. And I actually I got a call out of the blue today. I mentioned this to my contact at the county, and he goes, when can I get you in front of teachers? We want to talk about this. So there's definitely, we could tap into some fun unmet demands. So thanks. We're ready for questions.
Please go ahead and unmute if you have a question.
I'd like to add, or more like inquire, for those who may be interested in what you just described, this program. I'm personally a graduate student from Loma Linda University, and I am an alumnus from University of Redlands. And throughout my academic progression, I have met and created some relationships. And one, I believe, Jim, you're very familiar with, which is Karen Suarez from Uplift. And I also worked with HCI, Healthy Communities Institute. And so they have shared with me the idea of wanting to integrate something like this. And so I think that the individuals, the students who would be able to benefit from this type of program are certainly more willing and ready to do so. It's just a matter of really coming in and collaborating with everyone. So should someone have an interest like what I'm sharing, how would I go about on doing this integration?
Get a hold of us and we'll put you in the beta testing group.
Great.
And we could actually, there's actually a program we could probably, if we could, part of the funding would be have you run through, there is an existing course, it's about $500 to take the geospatial startup, but that would be fun to have you take that and then report back to us how that went. And then actually start your business. And then I'm part of another nonprofit that we're working on the mentoring piece of it. So we'd love to work with you. You can find my contact information pretty easily on the Redlands website. And we'd love to have you on the team. We need more diversity in the team too. So I'd love to have you help us figure out how to do this. We think it's got an unmet need. It has the possibility. And one of the things that's frustrating to me is that the biggest program in the Inland Empire is at Cal State San Bernardino. If he maxes out his entire program, he's at 500 students. I'd like to have 1,000 startups. I'd like to have 40,000 startups. Nobody's thinking about this at scale. If we do this right, we could be using GIS to identify thousands of opportunities for small businesses to go, and I think they would succeed if we do it right. And then there's people out there. We have an alum who's president of a credit union, and we want to get her credit union wants to fund female startups. So we need women entrepreneurs, and then we'll go after all the other credit unions and say, hey, they're on board. Why don't you get on board?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Jim. I actually already have your contact information because Karen had shared with me in regards to helping her map out the businesses near the project that they're trying to implement.
Yeah.
And so I shared a map with her, and she's like, "Oh, thank you so much." So I'm very happy to hear that, this opportunity is open. So I will definitely follow up with you on this.
Great. That's my summer project to get this thing up and going. So come and join us.
Great to hear.
I actually had a question about the K-12 component, if that's something that you could talk about. Yeah.
I can't see who's talking. Who's that?
Oh, it's Sarah.
Oh, hi, Sarah. I saw
yeah.
your box blinking, but not your picture. Hi, Sarah.
Not my picture.
The K-12 component, let me explain why that's in there. We, some colleagues and I went to the coordinator for the 12 community colleges for business programs. And we said, we see you don't have entrepreneurship program. If you don't have one, Redlands can't have one because you're a pipeline into us. And they said, well, we do have one. It's just not up yet. So over the last year, they got ready to put theirs in, but they said, you know where we need help? We don't have a pipeline into our program. And I'm like, oh, if nobody's coming into entrepreneurship at the community college level, then it's going to be harder for us to grab them either as freshmen for the college or as transfer students for the School of Business. So that's why I started researching the K-12 world. And it's very exciting what's going on there. There are some incredibly dedicated people. We don't do career and tech education at University of Redlands. We only do the single subject or the multiple subject academic side. But it turns out that if you get that degree and you have work experience, you can take one class and be qualified to teach in those programs. So it's like, oh, that's really cool. So I think one of the things we would target would be to try to find people that did want to do this. Maybe they'd sold their business, have enough credits to go and do that. But it's really hard if you don't already have a degree. So there's a lot of barriers to getting people into teaching these classes because it's all set up with academic credentials as the key, or state credentials, not the work experience alone isn't enough.
Yeah, I was wondering if anybody was offering to participate in the technology side, because when I saw that and I saw the remote learning and the disadvantage that we discovered going into COVID, that a lot of students, especially K through 12, had no support from the district, didn't have any internet, might have had a cell phone. And so I want to know if there's someone out there who's willing to help, because I could think of a lot of students that could use it even outside of this. But even if it were remote into a classroom of multiple people, the district might not have the ability to have the appropriate tools to teach those students.
So what we want to do is take a teacher who might be the teacher of record and give them the tools and the mentors, so they would still be sort of legally in charge of the class, but then vet people that work it and automate as much of it as we can, so they kind of work through it self-paced, but then they would come together regularly through community meetings and through mentor meetings to stay on top of it. I'm currently mentoring 3 seniors in the college and 1 in the School of Business, and we're having a blast. It's really fun to walk people through these startup things. We're not doing the GIS piece, just the entrepreneurship piece. But I'm sort of getting practice at it, and I have another mentee from a program at Miramar College that really got a nice shout out in the LA Times. This kind of work is really great for us establishing our reputation as somebody who cares about the community. I think it's a really nice segue from what Jennifer's team is doing, because our role in the community needs to change. We need to be really reaching out to the unreached. I was just on a meeting, another one of our alums, Ida Hermosillo, she's working with a group called Grow Inland Achievement, and their target are the people that have dropped off the map for higher education. They're not in school. Some of them aren't even working. And how do we bring them back to the table? Programs like this could bring people like that back into education, because once they get an income stream going, it sort of brings back an applied learning that they may not have realized. And GIS jobs pay pretty well, so if they're able to do it, they might get hired without a degree, which would be fine.
This is very exciting work, and we're going to have to move on to the next presentation, unless you have a really quick one. Robert, do you have a quick? I saw your hand up.
Just a question of, is the goal to reach students, or is the goal to generate curriculum that can be provided to students?
Well, it's both. I mean, we want to work through partners, though. So I don't see us, at least initially, we'd be attracting students who are already in school, but we want to put it on a platform where we could have it accessible to the public if somebody wanted to come in And whether that be through School of Continuing Studies or through like a county funded program or through a public library, there's lots of ways we could do that. And there's the nice thing is Steve has, we finally found an area where Steve knows the right grants to get us right in the channel. There's a grant coming up for technology supported education. And we missed the March deadline. We think there's going to be another funding in October. My goal is to get that in. And Steve, we're going to go for it. I don't know how much it's going to be. It could be over $1 million. I don't know how much it could be, but we might do that in partnership with some other people. And with that kind of money, we could answer that question really well. We better let the next group go.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a great approach, and I found the CTE integration to be really exciting. Having worked in K-12 and GIS for most of my career, I think it's an interesting way to go. So I'm going to do the clapping hands thing on WebEx. If everyone wants to do that, I've never used these all that much, but you can clapping hands. All right, so then that be using GIS suitability analysis for electric vehicle charging locations. Brian Colson, would you like to take over the screen here?
All right, you guys can see my screen, right?
Yes, I can.
Perfect. All right, so try that over there. Okay. So hi, my name is Brian Colson. I'm a MBA student at the School of Business with a concentration in location analytics. And so this is a project that I worked on at work. And so my official work title is Senior IT Systems Analyst at SRP, which is Salt River Project. And so I'll talk today about a project that I worked on for citing EV infrastructure, site suitability analysis. So real quick overview of SRP. So we are a community-based non-for-profit energy company in Phoenix, Arizona. The main things we do is we deliver water and power, and we have some statistics there on the screen that you can see there. But one of the main key components of SRP is in 2019, we released our 2035 sustainability goals. And one of those sustainability goals was to get the enablement of over 500,000 electric vehicles within our service territory. And so the question became, how do we do that, and what do we do to try to do that? And that's where this project kind of came about, was this sustainability goal of enabling electric vehicles within our service territory. We realized that we wanted to make sure that we could have charging facilities for customers to be able to charge those electric vehicles. So that's essentially what this suitability analysis is. And I think most of these folks are GIS people, so you know what a suitability analysis does. But our goal here is to locate a direct current fast charging, or DCFC station. That's ultimately what we're trying to do. So you're going to determine the base criteria, you're going to drive the data, transform the data, combine it, and ultimately find your locations. I think that's pretty common for most people, GIS folks. The people at SRP, this is all like, whoa, you can do this in GIS? They're kind of surprised by all this. But so I'm going to talk a lot about the data that we used and then kind of what the end result looked like. So to start with, let's talk about data that we had. And so this map here on the left, the blue area represents our power service area. And for those of you who've never been to Arizona or know what these areas are, basically SRP, for various different reasons, we serve this portion of the metropolitan Phoenix area, but it excludes the downtown portions of Phoenix, Tempe, Mesa, Gilbert. And so that's kind of why those areas are more white. But what our grid planning and performance folks told us is that, okay, at a substation level, we have capacity to be able to handle one of these potentially 3 megawatt charging locations within these particular 10 planning areas. And so that's where we started with, is, okay, we need to focus our area in on just these 10 areas to start with. Next, we wanted to look at existing land use. So our regional planning agency puts out an annual existing land use layer. And so we just essentially took that land use and categorized it through a series of values from 1 to 10, 10 being areas of, say, high commercial development. This area here at 44th Street and Thomas, there's a big Target and a Costco there. That's kind of the construct, is where we're trying to take these land use values and only pull out the areas that we thought that there would be a good use for a charging facility accordingly. Next, we wanted to look at customer segmentation. So this is one example of what was 3 segments that we have. We have a marketing analytics segmentation data of all of our customers. And so we pulled out those 3 customer segments and did just a simple heat map on them based off of whether they are potentially already owning an electric vehicle or are more interested in becoming and owning an electric vehicle in the near future. And so that was kind of how we pulled out those particular customer segments. Next was probably the most complex that I had to do. So we took the nearest land uses that were associated with high traffic volumes. And what I mean by that is the fact that those areas were, the traffic volume data we got just as point features. And so we took those point features, ascribed them to the lines, and then did a near analysis to associate that these are the land uses associated with those areas that have high traffic volumes. That's kind of how we calculated that. So rural road going north-south is higher traffic volume than, say, Southern Avenue going east-west. And last but certainly not least, we wanted to incorporate existing EV charging facilities. So we took data from the Department of Energy that they publicly make available, and then just did a simple multiple ring buffer, whereas wherever there's an existing facility, we want to make that more of a negative value, and then where there is not an existing facility, it would be more of a positive value. And so most folks probably know this, simple map algebra. You basically take all these raster layers, combine them together, and you get the results. And so the goal of this was essentially to kind of show the results of, okay, areas that are cool or that are kind of more blue color is where there's existing infrastructure. Then that's not necessarily suitable for a new charging station location. But areas that are red or orange are much more where they want to focus in on and see exactly what they would potentially want to look at those particular locations or those areas for a potential charging station location. So the next steps for us is to look at some of these areas and come up with sites for further examination, actually getting down to the, okay, these are the individual transformers or these are the individual switches that have the capacity to be able to handle these types of facilities, and then start to talk with development partners. SRP ourselves, we're not going to develop this ourselves. We'll work with developers to do that. And my hope was to eventually have this as a construction picture of like, hey, look, this is how GIS went to eventually getting to construction. It's unfortunately not there yet. Hopefully when I present this as a part of the user conference this summer, I might have a construction picture, but that's kind of the end goal, is kind of how we went from, they didn't know where to even start within our service territory and where to put potentially one of these facilities. And using the existing data, we help them get to a more finite area into where to focus their energies on accordingly. And with that, I'll take it open for questions.
Well, thank you very much, Brian. Do we have questions? What was, well, for one thing, I have to say, after living in Tucson for 30 years, it's really nice to see Arizona featured in SRP, and I'm familiar with the Salt River Chain of Lakes and all that stuff. So what was the most difficult part of your project, and that you could easily, if you did it again, what would make it easier?
The most difficult part for me was the traffic volume data, because getting a series of points that were essentially just, if you've ever dealt with traffic counts, they're nothing more than just when they put a traffic counter on the ground, that's all, the results are that single location. And so taking that data and trying to do something with it that we could apply in this scenario, like I tried creating, I tried all these different things, but at the end of the day, it was like, the end goal is we need an area of land use, which is kind of why we landed at that nearest land use construct. But I would have gone, if I'd done it differently now, I would have gone back to the regional planning agency and said, hey, what other outputs do you have? Like I got the data from them and I just kind of went on my way. I probably would have tried to work with them a little bit more to try to see exactly, okay, because they have maps that show a more, what I would call like a heat map construct, but they didn't provide me that data. All they provided me was the raw data. So it made it a little more challenging.
All right, thank you, Brian. Any other questions, comments?
Yes, actually. Hi, Brian. Hi, everyone. This is Lukman Barnawi. I'm speaking from Saudi Arabia. I have a question.
Oh, wow.
Hi.
Yeah, I've actually studied in University of Redlands, and I'm a big fan of the school and the MSGS program and the Redlands city itself, and Israel and everything there. I miss the orange. I miss everything there. So my question is, Brian, is actually for the EV stations. Is it a public source data or you collected it?
Yes, it is public source data that you can download from the existing electric vehicle stations for the Department of Energy. So if you were just, I mean, you can just find it on Google. You just look up U.S. Department of Energy existing EV locations. It's publicly available data.
Okay, I'm asking actually because if it's a source or third-party data, we may gonna be interested as a hair technology to source out. Me and my team and the colleague globally, we are doing data sourcing and community initiatives and developers things. And the second question is actually, have you used APIs, map APIs to actually show those, I mean, when you do this raster analytics and all those stuff, did you publish your result as a web application or such using
I did
API?
not, no. I did not serve it out in any sort of server environment. This information, it was meant purely just as internal. I mean, they're fine with me presenting it in this forum or in a conference this summer because it's kind of a cool use of the technology, but we have not made it publicly available data to consumed by anyone else.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
I'm actually in Salt Lake City. I'm doing a program. But I had a question in regards to who your potential stakeholders are that are who are you guys? Local businesses, gas stations? Do you guys have any sort of outreach program to try and implement this new?
Yeah, so I think if I understand the question is basically, are we working out in the community to try to get more adoption to electric vehicles? Is that kind of what you're asking?
I guess mostly the adoption for somebody to build the actual EV charging location itself, right? Because
gotcha.
Your company is not going to be installing these, so who's going to, and how are you guys going to somebody to adopt them?
I don't know the answer in terms of who. I would have to ask my clients, my internal clients that are actually working on this. I don't think that they have a particular a company that they're interested in working with. But you know, because there's a few different charging partners out there that I've heard them talk about. But realistically, there's a couple different components there. You got to make sure that one, we have the capability and capacity to be able to put the electricity there, and two, if you're putting it, say, at a shopping center, do the landowners of the shopping center, are they okay with that being put there? And so there's kind of multiple levels of components. This initial study was just to kind of look at a you know, to go from 30,000 foot to say 3,000 foot, and they haven't gotten down to 300 feet. If that makes sense.
Absolutely. Just a follow-up question: if your company ever decided to invest in putting these charging stations on the property that they own, say the substations, is that a potential?
That is a potential, and I would say that only because I've heard rumblings about it, but I don't know any specific details. But the challenge with that is that at least from a consumer standpoint, I'm going to plug my car at a substation and then do what, right? I mean, the whole premise of this kind of construct or this type of analysis was I'm going to go plug in my car and then go to the movies for 2 hours. So that's why we talked about that a lot internally. We talked about, okay, well, let's put it on where we own land, which is substations amongst other areas. But it became this, you know, thinking of it from a consumer standpoint, we put substations in areas that people don't want to be. So it doesn't really make it very usable.
Great, thank you.
I'll throw a question out. I was working with there's a tech energy-based tech incubator over at UC Riverside, and there's a lot of money flowing out of the utilities in California to try to rectify inequities similar to the ones Jennifer has been studying. And so one of the grants I was looking at, I didn't get, but we overlaid these districts that the state has designated as underserved. And I wonder if Arizona has a similar thing, because then that becomes more of, well, they're always the last people to get internet. They'd be the last people to get this. There was somebody in the paper today that said, well, you know, somebody in a poor neighborhood can't afford an electric car. Well, you can actually afford an electric car, but you probably can't afford this. And so is that, to what degree did socioeconomic or ethnic status fall into this, or was that sort of off the table?
It
Can you
wasn't.
kind of
Yeah, yeah, I see totally where you're going with that, and we struggle with that too. It was actually just on the news last night or the night before where they were talking about how vaccinations for the COVID-19, the affluent North Scottsdale neighborhood is 75%, and yet the poor minority neighborhoods are only at 15%. How is that? You know, I mean, it's the same type of stuff. We discussed that at length using that customer segmentation data, and that's kind of how we try to adopt it. But we did recognize the fact that, okay, if we did want to incorporate this in a greater realm, we should pull in some of those potentially customer segments that are much more under economic hardship or minorities, to make sure that they have the capabilities to be able to own an electric vehicle in the future. So yes, it was discussed, and ultimately it wasn't initially carried forward, but it was something that we might consider in a future iteration of this.
Okay, well, great questions, and thank you very much for your talk and the discussion that followed it. One thing the questions have demonstrated is the reach that our conference is having this year, which would never have been possible if we did it in the Orton Center on campus or Casa Loma. What I want to do is encourage folks to type into the chat where they're coming from, particularly the folks who are coming to the conference from a distance. It'd be wonderful to hear where you're all from today. John, you're up next with your talk on mapping the Green Book. Take it over.
Okay, just hang on just a second while I share my screen. I'm still kind of a newbie.
And I forgot to clap for the last time.
Okay, so I think you can see my screen.
Yes.
Okay, good. So I'm from the history department here. I'm part of a larger team that includes Lisa Benvenuti from the center, who's been doing a lot of hard work with this project. And we also have two students, Wen-Mei Bai and Nicholas Bloomingdale, who are helping us out with the data entry. As you can see by the title, this is a work in progress. We're still in the early stages to try and map the entire run of the Green Book. In case you don't know, the Green Book was published over the course of about 30 years from 1936 to 67 to provide listings and advertisements for businesses in the United States that would serve African-American travelers and tourists and motorists. You might automatically think that this kind of book applied chiefly to the southern US, but as you can see from the index page from 1948 in the middle there, this was an issue for all 50 states. In fact, the very first edition of the Green Book was centered just on New York City and the surrounding area. So this is basically going to produce a nationwide series of maps over the course of over 30 years. Our sources are basically digitized copies of the Green Book available online through the New York Public Library and the Library of Congress. Our project goals. In some ways, the goals are linked to an opportunity here. I've only been able to find 2 editions of the Green Book that have been mapped, one by the New York Public Library for, I think it was the 1948 edition, and then the University of South Carolina has also mapped 1 year. But they're very basic maps. They get people interested, but they don't really have a lot of opportunities for advanced spatial analysis. So our primary goal here is to create a searchable geodatabase for all the businesses that either listed or advertised in the Green Book for its entire run. And our hopes are that this database can then be made available for teaching and research, and also for any kind of community groups who want to access this information. The Excel spreadsheets that make up the database can easily be imported into Arc Online as CSV files. This will give us basic maps, but also enable us to do some spatial analysis of the data. Digitization and data entry on the right there, you can kind of get a glimpse for what a page from an original copy of the Green Book looks like. We considered using OCR software, but we opted for manual entry of this information to catch errors, and there quite frequently are misspellings, there are typos and double entries in the original sources. So we figured if we did this manually, we'd be able to fix those from the very start. Also, manual entry allows us to arrange the data according to certain variables like the type of business, the gender of the owner. This would then allow the users to, for example, identify female-owned businesses from the Green Book for the entire run or a particular year, or if you wanted to simply show the restaurants or the nightclubs or hotels for a particular year or state or for the entire country. So that's why we opted for the kind of hard-nosed manual entry process. I know it might be hard to see, but this is an example of one of our spreadsheets that we have been working on. Column A has the year, 1948. Column B gives us the business name. Column C gives us the business type. And we're talking about everything from hotels to tourist homes, which are kind of like an early version of a bed and breakfast, to restaurants, taverns, barbershops, garages, liquor stores, restaurants. We even have dude ranches and camps. And barbers and on and on. So it's a really wide range of different business types that are located in the Green Book. We can also identify in some cases the name of the owner, but not always. And occasionally we can actually get a glimpse into the gender of the owners too. Tourist homes, for example, were most often owned by female owners. So they give us a glimpse into female ownership within some of these businesses. We're even concerned with the source type. Was it a listing or did they pay extra for an advertisement? And we basically have two columns for addresses. The first column is a basic address you would expect with a number and a street name, but quite often we can come across addresses in the Green Book that will simply have a street like 19th Avenue or simply a corner like 6th and Clay, okay? Arc Online does a pretty good job with the corner addresses. It will locate 51st in Michigan in Chicago and do a good job at it. When it's just a street name, it just kind of randomly puts a point down for us. So we do have to do some quality control after we enter these spreadsheets into Arc Online to fix little things like that. And then of course we have the city column and the state. So that's an example of what one of our spreadsheets look like. This is an animation that Lisa put together that shows you the expansion of the listings in the Green Book during the first 10 years of its existence. It takes about 20 seconds, I believe, so I'm going to go ahead and press start. There's not a timeline, but this basically covers 1937 to 1947. There we go. So you can see towards the end, it is still filling in. Some sample maps. California in 1960, you can see it on the left there, just showing us locations of businesses that were listed or advertised in the Green Book. Obviously the Bay Area up north and of course Los Angeles, you'll find quite a few listings, but it includes the Central Valley. You can see Needles way out by the Colorado River there. And there is one on the map there for Yosemite National Park. There are more locations in that park. We simply have to find park maps and try and find the exact location of some more of the camps and lodges that were up there. Los Angeles area, 1960 by business type, you can see on the right there, where again, we can easily identify different types of businesses there. So you can see the hotels in red, motels in blue, and on and on and on. We're just off this map, of course. San Bernardino does not have any businesses listed for 1960. However, if you go back to 1948, there were 2 tourist homes in the kind of northwestern portion of the city. Okay, so those are two very basic sample maps that can be generated with these CSV files once the data is filled in. And then here's 2 more sample maps. I had to choose Illinois because that's where I'm from. As you can see, Illinois in 1948, from it looks like Vandalia in the south all the way up to Waukegan and Rockford in the north. And then Chicago, 1948. There you can see I ran a basic heat map. If you know anything about Chicago and its layout, obviously the south side there, you'll find a lot more businesses that were listed in the Green Book. So we can do this on a national scale, state and cities, and then of course adjust for time. So if you have any questions or comments, I'm very happy to hear them. Do you want me to stop sharing my screen?
Oh, that's fine. Yeah, then you can see people better.
Right, hang on a second here. Okay.
Well, wonderful. One question I had is, what degree did you have to deal with, like cities that disappeared or street names that changed or things of that nature?
Yeah, it's a lot of the work, of course, just comes from putting the spreadsheets together, correcting typos, misspellings, things like that. I found out that when you start importing them into Arc Online, about 90% of the addresses transfer perfectly. They'll show up where they're supposed to be, but there's always about 10% that either show up in a different city because a street name has changed. So one example was it was supposed to be in San Luis Obispo, but it put the hotel in Chico, which is pretty far away. But I figured out that they changed the street name. So the quality control after we begin actually putting it into the mapping software, there's going to be a lot of quality control issues there where we have to double check those, find some other historical maps to help fill in the gaps. So yeah, it's one thing to put the spreadsheet together. It's another thing to fix those questions and those problems that you see only when it finally appears on a map.
Seems like there's a lot of room for collaboration with Jen's team and
Yeah,
Jon's team.
We've been speaking about this. My goal is to finish California sooner rather than later, so we can start applying it to Jen's classes and any other kind of programs that we're running locally. And I know this might get me in trouble, but this sounds like a business GIS project too, of a historical nature. So I can see how this could interest people from a lot of different backgrounds and points of view. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, it seems like obviously a lot of manual labor for those folks, you, I guess, or whomever you're working with to get it digitized. Have you thought about doing like a crowdsourcing effort to try to see if you can get some volunteers to help with the data input of that?
I hadn't thought of that. Thank you.
Okay.
So crowdsource it to just basically do that basic.
Yeah. Have like allow people to volunteer, and then have several people try the same piece of input, and if it matches, it's probably right.
There you go. That's a great idea. Yeah. I think the closest we've come to that is, again, kind of students, just wrangling in students to do that kind of basic. I don't want to call it mind numbing, but it is very repetitive. It's very meticulous. I enjoy it myself, but I realize it's not for everyone. But the crowdsourcing idea is great. I just wrote that down. So thank you.
Sure.
I have a question. I mean, so first of all, I'm sad there's not more San Bernardino and Riverside locations. But I guess I wonder, having looked at this material, so my project is trying to do some work, or some of my students right now are trying to map some historic businesses from San Bernardino, some historic Black businesses in San Bernardino. And I wonder, to what degree do you think we'd be able to use some of the locations from the Green Book to actually map Black business ownership, right? Do we have knowledge kind of historically about the degree to which they were Black businesses being marked, or just businesses that were open to not rude to Black customers?
Right. That was something which was in the back of my mind in this project, and I have to come right out and kind of admit this is not my field. Historians specialize in certain geographic regions, and my region of specialization is sub-Saharan Africa. So part of we tried to offer a course devoted to this project this spring, and the only way I could do it was by bringing in an American historian who knows that kind of historical context, and unfortunately she became the new associate dean. So we'll have to basically, I can provide you with the data and the mapping. I think it will take local experts, or especially experts in US history, to tell me, could it have been a white person, for example, who had a hotel or a camp or any other kind of business who was simply progressive enough at the time to say, I'll serve everyone? Or was it actually a Black-owned business? I honestly can't say, but that has been in the back of my mind. It's a good question.
Okay, we need to move on to the next presentation. Thank you very much, John. I'm going to do my clapping hands this time. Our next talk is 3D visualization of deep sea corals and sponges with multi-beam bathymetry using ArcGIS Scene and JavaScript API with Yanlin Li and Fong Ren. You can take over, you can unmute and take over the screen.
Hi, hello everyone. I pre-record this PowerPoint, and in the end, I'll be showing you the demos that I have. And go ahead, sit down and enjoy. Righty.
There's a particular way you have to share your screen and WebEx.
Yeah, can you hear it?
I don't hear any voice right now.
You don't hear it?
Go back and unshare your screen.
Okay.
And then click on share, and then you should see a little drop-down menu that says optimize for text. Do you see that?
Yeah, oh yeah. Motion
And then
video.
click that and click video and whatever.
Okay.
And then make sure it says, what is it, computer sound or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Let's try it now. Hello everyone. My name is Yanlin Li from University of Redlands. MSGS cohort 37. I'm advisor Fang Ren PhD. My topic for today is 3D visualization of deep sea corals and sponges using ArcGIS JavaScript API. And deep sea corals and sponges, also referred to cold water corals and sponges. They live in from 50 meters to more than 3,000 meters below the sea level, where sunlight cannot be reached. Deep sea is a dark and cold place, yet life still formed there. Cold water corals play important role in bassinic ecosystem. Many fish, shrimp, crab, and other creatures use deep sea corals and sponges as their habitat. Although deep sea corals and sponges live in the dark, but they still facing some challenges, including rising water temperature, water salinity change, low salinity versus high salinity. Both water temperature and salinity change can make coral to bleach or turn into white. A cold water coral grow very slowly. Normal speed of growth is about 5 millimeter per year. That's why NOAA wants to study the deep sea corals and sponges. This project is focused on studying the relationship between the seafloor geomorphology and the deep sea coral and sponges. The map showing on the slide is the map NOAA wants to enhance. Although the map has lots of useful information, but it's not user-friendly. Another problem with 2D map, especially in the study, we want to see how the corals and sponges are located on the geological structure, like continental shelf, slope, canyons, ridges, and seamounts. But in this 2D map, we cannot see those features. In this study, all the data are provided by NOAA. The picture on the top right is the remote operation vehicle, and the second picture is how survey vessels are scanning the seafloor. And the last one is the completed bathymetry map. It's a finished product in the particular area. It's all the pieces they surveyed, they piece them together. The first deep sea corals and sponges data are downloaded from the map portal that I showed you from the last slide. The second OER cruiser trackline is how the survey vessel are collecting data from the seafloor using the multi-beam echo sonar to collect bathymetry data. And the third remote ROV dive track are the paths when the ROV collecting data, which is hover on the seafloor. The fourth ROV dive location is a location where they put down the ROV equipment when conducting the survey.
I was just
Lastly,
going to add
ROV
that we have a little
emergency point
problem with your screen.
is the indicator when they. Oh, go ahead.
Your screen was flipping all over the place. I thought it might resolve, but you might try to start it again. I'm not sure why that's happening, but we're getting the audio just fine, but the visuals are kind of doing weird stuff.
Do you want me to restart it, or just
start where you're at, and let's see what happens.
Okay. When the ROV is in water and out water. Is it good now? The graphic on the right
It's
is
still bouncing around.
RGS. Let's go back. Still buffing around. Maybe it's because my internet works here.
It's almost like a frame rate issue. I'm not sure what's causing it. I'm not an expert on.
Might help if everybody took off their cameras.
The graphic on the right is a basic workflow for this project. I want to mention a few points here. After I download the data from the portal they provided, I must filter out the missing values they have in the dataset. So there's some data engineering before using ArcGIS Pro. And then I can plug them into ArcGIS Pro to configure the elevation value or depth value for the deep sea coral and sponges point. And then combine with the ROV dive track, ROV dive location, multi-beam bathymetry base map, Oceana OER or Oceana Explorer cruiser track lane to publish as the ArcGIS scene feature layer. Then I used ArcGIS JavaScript API and Visual Studio Code editor to design a custom scene application. ArcGIS API for JavaScript Sandbox. It is a tool that I use when I was learning and developing the JavaScript API custom scene application, which I believe is very helpful. You can interact with the map by editing on the left, and you can immediately showing on the right. I think that's my demo coming up now. And let's refresh it. Because the product is still in the development phase, I can show you what I have right now. On the top right hand corner is a widget for the layer widget, which you can toggle on and off when you are playing around with this scene application. Let's just toggle it off for now. And this 3D map is way better than the 2D map to seeing the geological structures. For example, when we zoom in and we can see the yellow star, once you click on the yellow star, it will give you the dive locations and the information about the dive. And then we can play around with and then we can zoom in as well. We can also click on the track link, which is here. And for this type location EX1703, and there's a couple of EX1703, but this type is a type 02. We can zoom out and see there's another 1703, but this one is zoom out here 1703, and we're gonna click the type track. and this one's a dive 03 because each dive has a specific location and the information about the data point, data access point, and then also the data collection and the sample repository. And when we zoom in, we can see how the deep sea cores or sponges are located when they're conducting the survey. Once we click on it, we can see the information about the coral. This one's the glass sponges. Oh, sorry, this one's the glass sponges. And the first widget I was going to design, and I'm going to design, is the automatic click on this image will display it here. But instead of displayed in another browser, I would like to design it to hover over the right-hand corner, which when you click on it, you can automatically see the pictures. And that's cool thing I like to use this thing application, and maybe is a good education application for the a younger generation. And when we go back where we started, we can play around. This is another widget called the home widget, and then we can go to other place. For example, here, see these ridges, Sea Canyon, and we can also just play around with it and then browsing and explore the deep sea. And back to the slide. And I would like to thanks my advisor Fang Ren. She is been really helpful to my project throughout the course, and also thank to my cohort 37 and 37.5 for to back up my study life. And I want to thank to the Esri staff, Phil and Pindi, who are helping me to understand the 3D application of Esri product. And I would like to also thank the NOAA team, NOAA Deep Sea Core Research and Technology Program, Robert, Heather, Tom, Lindsay. And lastly, I will thank you for joining us.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Do we have time for a question or two?
Yeah, I would lovely to have questions.
That's fascinating. Have you been able to draw any conclusions about the nature of the sponges, or what was the intended audience for this data? Really cool to look at. I've never seen data before.
Yeah, I was first design this project for anyone can visit this website and anyone can sort of play around because the data are published online and free of use for anybody. And I think this audience will be very broad from maybe younger generation to very old. Yeah.
Okay, another question?
Actually, I'm just asking, have you take the pollutions and such kind of change and global warming and such to observe like some changes, let's say, or effect such elements?
You are talking about when I was using the scene view?
Yeah, exactly. When you visualize the data in 3D, so if you got an access for, let's say, records for global warmings or like pollutions, water pollutions and such, if you visualize them along together in 3D, have you come to a conclusion or you're thinking to do such things to see the effect?
Yeah, I was thinking to do the analysis for the temperature change, but some data set, because the data set I selected are only contained with the image URL, I didn't include all the data set that I downloaded. But some data element are missing values for the temperature. That's why I chose to to do so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. That's really cool visualizations. But yeah, when you zoomed in, that was really amazing to look at the 3D representation there. So thank you very much. And I'm going to do my clapping hands here again. So
thank you so much.
Appreciate your presentation, and thank you very much for being with us tonight. Our last talk tonight is by Dr. Leilani Stell. How can photo ID help save whales? Leilani, can you take over the screen and unmute yourself?
Can you see
Great.
that? Can you see my screen now?
Looks great.
Great. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about a project that is, well, part of a big scale research project that I've been doing for many years that involves students and using photo ID and GIS to study marine mammals as a whole, but today I'm going to focus on one species, which is the bottlenose dolphin. And kind of pulling away from GIS for a moment, the key part of this is the photo ID. And this is a type of approach that's been used for a long time in wildlife ecology, as people need to be able to follow individual animals to really learn more about them. And you can use natural markings, and of course with the advent of digital photography, that's made this process much easier. And photo ID is used in a great variety of species, from zebras to whale sharks, and with marine mammals being in the ocean and hard to see many times, photos can be really useful. So we do this research locally out of Dana Point, and this project has been going consistently since about 2012, and we're very fortunate that we have a relationship with a whale watch company, Dana Wharf Whale Watch, that lets my students go out for free to collect data year-round. And we've also been involved with Earthwatch, which helped fund our research for a number of years. And we have a lot of people involved because it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort to collect all of the data. But essentially, we go out on boats and we record all the marine mammals we see, and we use Collector app to get the locations of all of the sightings, and then we can map that. So in terms of what types of marine mammals we see, we do not see all of these. This is all of the different whales of the world, but we see quite a few of them. The one we're going to focus on today is right here as one of the odontocetes, or toothed whales, and that's the bottlenose dolphin. And of course, we always want to know, where do we see the animals? And here is a map of just the bottlenose sightings over the years. And this is from 2012. Overall, we've seen about 19 different species, but in terms of the bottlenose, we're going to look at them in a little more detail. And this is just what a bottlenose looks like, a little bit of background. I think most people are familiar with this species because they're the ones that you see often in marine parks. This is, of course, Flipper was a bottlenose dolphin. And they're usually found in small groups called pods. They are found throughout the oceans. They're primarily in the tropical and temperate waters. They're not found in the polar regions. But you can see that they're found in the Indian, Pacific, and Atlantic. And of course, this is our region here, which is one of their primary range. The local population is estimated to only be about 2,000 animals, and we don't actually know that much about them, especially compared to other parts of the world where populations are very well known and they can identify every individual. That's not the case with the local California population of bottlenose. So this is a map that's animated that I wanted to share, and it shows all of our sightings of bottlenose. You can see them pop up as little dolphin icons. Each icon is just showing one sighting, not representing the number of individuals. And you can see at the top, it's showing the date, and this is from 2012 through almost current time, doing it in 4-month intervals. And one thing you might notice is that those seem, different times, different locations. There's no real obvious trends in terms of seasonality or even locations. In this study period, we have seen bottlenose 156 different times. with about 2,000 individuals based on the numbers in the pod, with group sizes ranging from about 1 to even 200, but more on average of about just 10 to 20 per pod. And one of the things that we're looking at with using GIS is trying to understand about what habitat they're using, trying to identify if there's particular areas that are especially important. We can also, of course, look at their behaviors, what they're doing in different areas. They are year-round residents, so they're here to feed, to mate, to travel, do all of their different things. And bottlenose dolphins in general are facing many threats such as pollution, disease, harassment, noise impacts. And so hopefully with having a better idea of their distribution, we can help management in trying to identify areas to conserve. Now, if we combine that with photo ID, we can use photographs to identify individuals. And this is from a study done a number of years ago by a student where she went through a lot of our photos and spent a lot of time and only found a few matches. And part of that is because it's really hard to identify the animals. We use their dorsal fin and we look at particular notches. You can see this one has some very obvious marks and it matches a dolphin up here. These 3 examples were actually seen in the same pod both times. So that was kind of interesting. But the other members of the pod were different animals. And so this was a study done in 2014, and there were only a few matches from that study. And so we were trying to look at other ways to do this analysis, and that led us to a program called Flukebook that automates the process. And it basically takes a photo and it automatically does a tracing of the trailing edge of the dorsal fin, and then it uses an algorithm to compare that to other photos in the database and see if there's matches. Now, the person still has to confirm whether it's a match or not. So they're given options, and then there's still the user component. So this is an example where we have 2 different photographs of the same animal, and this one is clearly a match. And so, but you can see that it wasn't the first choice of the program. It actually came up as number 12. And here's one that's a little more obvious. This one I think anyone could pick out, but many of them are more subtle. So we currently have about 800 photos uploaded into the Flukebook program. We've about 80% of those have been identified going through the program. And of those, we found about 99 matches. Many of those were what we call daily duplicates, meaning it was photos of the same animal taken at the same sighting. So those aren't really what we'd consider re-sightings. But we have almost 50 individuals seen on multiple days. And in some cases, this first image, actually, if you notice, these were taken 3 years apart. So the same animal seen 3 years apart. And the longest interval we have is 7 years in our database. Now, some of the animals are very recognizable. In fact, we have a celebrity dolphin known as Patches, who has a form of leucism, which is like albinism, but not complete. And so Patches is very obvious. And when Patches shows up, it makes all the social media and even the local news. One thing I was excited about is that with our program, we found matches of Patches in our own database. And what was really neat about this is that although we can look at it and see that Patches is clearly the same animal, its dorsal fin is actually really clean. It doesn't have a lot of notches, but the program matched it just on the trailing edge, not on the coloration. So that gives me confidence that this program is actually working. And with this kind of approach, we can understand more about habitat use, site fidelity, social structure, and it gives us a lot of insight into the bottlenose dolphins, and of course the other species that we do photo ID with as well. And just wanted to acknowledge all of the different groups that have been involved, especially the students at the university and the summer program where the students are able to work full-time. And hopefully this summer we'll be able to get a lot of this done and get a nice complete catalog of our bottlenose dolphins. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing and open it to questions.
So it's just so wonderful to see. My background is in image analysis and GIS, so it's fun to see both of them added together. The way these things are being done. Questions? Do we have any questions or comments?
I have a question. Sorry, I tried raising my hand, but I don't know if you can see it.
Oh, just shout out.
Okay, sure thing. Leilani, if a dolphin, so I noticed in one of the flukes that you showed it, or the dorsal fin, it had like a big, like what looks like an injury in the back of it. So if an animal gets like a pretty bad injury that like affects the like morphology of like the dorsal fin, like will Flukebook still recognize it? Or does it depend where the injury is and how big is it? Or are you able to still identify the dolphin through other means, so you can keep that logging more accurate? Does that make sense?
Yes, and that's a great question, and definitely something that people look at is, how long do most of these injuries last? Do they stay? Do they heal? In which case you might not be able to recognize it. A case of if you had one that was looking totally normal and then a huge injury occurred, it probably wouldn't catch that. It probably wouldn't recognize that the previous uninjured one was the same. But once they get the injuries, they tend to be very consistent, and it will catch it if it adds new ones on top. So like, at least it seems like it from our data that, if you have one notch and you get a second notch, it'll likely show up as one of the options. And a lot of researchers have studied this in other populations, and it seems like for the most part, the identification marks are pretty consistent over a relatively long period of time. And people have identified animals, 20 years even, based on these markings. The ones that are problematic are the ones that don't have any indentations or divots in the dorsal fin. If it's what we call a really clean dorsal fin, that's actually not useful for photo ID.
I have another follow-up question. Are there any other programs that use coloration as a factor in IDing? Or just is Flukebook like the only like one that really exists?
No, so there are a number of programs. We actually used one called Darwin previously, but we didn't have as much success as with Flukebook. But Flukebook still gives us some trouble. We get a lot of error messages and the thing not working. We're actually just starting to use it with another species of dolphin, where it will use two algorithms, one on the dorsal fin and one on the coloration, because this other species has lots of marks and different patterns. So we're going to see if having those two actually gives us more effective use. But I have to say, I traveled at one point using my global entry, and I went through the machine, and it takes a photo of my face, and it recognized me just from the photo. And I'm thinking, okay, I don't look like myself after traveling for hours and looking up at the picture. How is it that we have programs that can identify out of millions of people, yet we don't have very good programs for identifying whales and dolphins?
With Flukebook, is it connected to like a larger database, or is it kind of local? Like, can you see where that dolphin's also been sighted somewhere else, or is it kind of a local database kind of thing?
You have the choice. So you can search just within your, like what we've been doing to start with is just searching our images to try and see how many matches we have. But then we have the option of searching and matching with other people's catalogs. And the nice thing there is then you can actually make collaborations if you find another researcher who has images. It's not, it's used a fair amount, but I don't know of any other bottlenose dolphin researchers in the area using it. The other ones who are doing bottlenose are like Atlantic, so I wouldn't expect any matches. But I'm hoping that maybe some of the people who do work out of like San Diego, or they occasionally get bottlenose up further north, although it's pretty rare, or maybe in New Mexico. It'd be great to be able to do some more comparison.
And is that data, does that have any location information itself, or is that just like, could you see where else you've seen that dolphin, or you would just know who to contact to see, like in there in San Diego, so you would kind of know that?
Yeah, typically you put the, one of the fields is latitude, longitude, So for our data, we always have that because that's something we record. We have been asking for contributions from people who are out on whale watch boats to share their photos as well. And unfortunately, a lot of those images don't have any location other than where they left from. So we have kind of general vicinity, but not the exact spot, which is still useful, but we like it, you know, if it's geotagged, obviously.
And it seems like a great application to put like a street view like camera on these tour boats and just have it stare out into the ocean when they're going by with these tours and just collect so much.
Yeah, there's a lot of people on boats taking photos, and I really think that's somewhat of an untapped resource because there's just, you know, there's a lot of people who spend a lot of time on the boats, and many of them get decent photos too. And they use drones a lot as well, which is something we're trying to start doing. But you get some great footage with the drones. Not as much for photo ID, but for other aspects.
It's gotten so bad that the dolphins are filing privacy complaints. They really are tired of having their faces recognized. They're trying to disguise themselves with kelp and seaweed. They know what you're up to, Leilani.
There's just no privacy.
Yep.
Well, wonderful job, Leilani, and really interesting research. I'm going to do my clapping hands thing again here for you, and also for everyone that presented their work tonight in the lightning talks. I really appreciate you sharing your work with us tonight. We're going to move on to the next segment here. I'm going to just stand up for a second off my chair. We didn't build in any breaks into our symposium, which I apologize for. We just did a big run here for 3 hours. So if you need to get up and move around, feel free to do that. We'll just keep in touch with us as you move around your room. I'm going to encourage everyone I'm going to encourage Lisa, if she's still around, to post the link for voting for the posters again. Or yeah, if you can do it, Lisa, if you're listening in, that would be great. We're still taking votes on the posters till posters and story maps till 7:30, and then we will shut down the voting and find the winner after that. I'm going to share my screen here for a second, and this will take me for just a second. You probably will be seeing yourself now. And I'm going to do Addie's commentary here. Oops, I need to go back though. I did my screen the right way. Apologize for that. Let's see. Stop sharing. And then I'll go back and start it again. Oops, I turned off my video too. Okay, there we go. Oh, nope. Did it again. Okay. There we go. All right, I think we're good now. All right, so we'll bring in our speaker for the night, who's going to do a remote welcome for the symposium. And go.
Good evening. My name is Addie, and I am the mascot of the University of Redlands, and I would like to welcome you to the 2021 Spatial University Symposium.
All right, well, thank you, Addie. That was, it's always wonderful to see you. Too bad you couldn't do a live performance tonight, but just as having you here on a personalized video for our conference. The next segment here is going to be our awards ceremonies, and we have 2 sets of awards that we're going to give out today. And the first one are the Center for Spatial Business Student Excellence Awards, which are going to be presented by Professor Jim Pick and Avijit Sarkar from the School of Business. Jim, do you want to unmute? And
I want to unmute, yeah.
Yeah, unmute. Sorry.
So maybe if you could release that screen share, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, certainly. I'll do that. Hold on. There you go.
Okay, thanks a lot. So let me just pull something up here just a second. Okay. So the Center for Spatial Business is a 10-year-old center in the School of Business at the university, and it seeks to develop knowledge and thought leadership about location analytics, its applications in business for researchers, practitioners, students, and the community at large. And one of its goals is in the area of pedagogy and teaching. And the last 8 years, every year it's given awards for the previous calendar year to students who have done excellent work in spatial courses in the school. And this was kindly sponsored by one of the graduates of that program at Disney by the name of Kaz Takeda for many years. And more recently, there's been some sponsorship by ESRI for these awards. Also, I just wanted to mention 2 years ago, the center, with support from Dean Tom Horan, also co-sponsors an award for excellence in GIS in business to honor the outstanding project for students in the College of Arts and Sciences taking the course in GIS for organizations. However, I think that the semester is still going on in the college, and so we don't have that awardee yet or awardees to recognize. There's 6 School of Business students being honored with awards today who took a GIS course in the calendar year 2020. Awards are nominated by school faculty members and decided upon by an awards committee, this year consisting of Steve Moore, director of the Center for Spatial Studies, my colleague, Dr. Abhijit Sarkar, professor of analytics, and myself. And these are based on nomination letters from faculty and actually examining the student project reports. Appreciation is expressed to Steve and Abhijit and to all the faculty members who nominated students for awards. One of the faculty, actually this year, one of our faculty nominated 5 of the 6 awardees. And that faculty is Dr. Christopher Franklin, and I would like to extend special appreciation to him for teaching the courses and having so many nomination awardees come out of his courses. Now is the most important part, which is to recognize the 6 awardees for their excellence in GIS for business in 2020. So first awardee is Tricia Methe, an undergraduate. Tricia's project utilized GIS to visualize the program of support for homeless youth in the Placentia Lorba Linda Unified School District. Using federal data, homeless youths were identified by location and their geographic patterns analyzed relative to low-income areas and to school sites in the district, verifying there were homeless youth within every school area. Buffering around the school districts indicated locations of homeless students who, based on their transport distances, would be eligible for assistance through the federal McKinney-Vento Act. Another undergraduate, Chris Wasson, in his project, he addressed how to improve locational choices in the musical instrument retail industry. In fact, the guitar segment, to gain competitive advantage. It focused on the Guitar Center, a retailer, and how it could strategically locate retail stores in Southern California by using a geofencing strategy to reduce lost sales and increase competitiveness. The third awardee at the undergraduate level is Mercedes Speaker. Mercedes' project analyzed sales potential of residential properties in areas of Redlands and Loma Linda with lower population densities and Mercedes called these areas farming areas. They're not really farming areas, but relative to the built-up urban environment, they seem like farming areas. And her spatial approach went beyond what the real estate firm she had worked for was doing, and drew extensive data, including credit card debt, school debt, home equity, and turnover rate, to narrow down to a spatial target, and finally narrowing all the way down to a single property within the low density areas that had the most potential for the property to be sold. And then the last project that I want to talk about received the Graduate Award of Excellence. And this graduate award was given to a 3-student team consisting of Jordan Gomez, Trudev Raut, and Gerardo Unzueta. And this project was done as part of the 4th course in the location analytics concentration in the MBA, where students go out and do an applied project in an organization. This team developed a remarkable information application for a Nevada-based telecom utility that can support engineering staff in network staking design and conduit mapping for a fiber network. I was curious what staking means, and staking means determining new pathways as an addition to the network. So you stake different points at which you can put the line out to these new people on the network. This was done by mapping of the optimal network of fiber links and network assets. In the prototype, the network mapping was successful. Project demonstrates efficiency in network processing, and it included a database model, a migration plan, workflow implications, and a risk assessment framework. This was really quite remarkable, a project. Rather than going into any more detail, I want to share my screen and go to the center web page. Let me do that. And here we have our awardees. The awardees are shown in the top row, and the 2 left-hand awardees are shown in the left-hand side of the second row. And I looked earlier, earlier in the participants, I didn't see any of the awardees present. That might be because they're taking classes. If anybody wants to look at their projects, they just flip the card here on any of these awardees, and they can view the project itself, the whole paper. I'm just sorry I can't shake the hands of these awardees tonight, or instead give them an elbow bump. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Jim. I'm going to clap my hands here to honor those awardees and the great work that they did. And I enjoy every year participating in the award reviews, or the nomination reviews that I do with.
And let me just mention one other thing, that I do see now that one of the graduate students, Jordan Gomez, is here, and I'd appreciate if he could show his video and just wave so we can see him here. Jordan, can you do that? Well, I don't see him waving, but anyways, he's here. So I did want to congratulate him.
There he is. There he is.
Okay.
We put him on the spot.
Okay. Thanks again.
Okay, I'm going to re-share my screen and move over to the next slide here. Since 2016, the Roger Tomlinson Award for Excellence in GIS has been awarded to undergraduate and graduate students in the College of Arts and Sciences who have demonstrated strong research and academic capabilities in the field of geographic information science, GIS, or GI science. An English geographer, Roger Tomlinson was the primary founder of modern geographic information science. Accordingly, he is known as the father of GIS. The Tomlinson Award was established at the University of Redlands through a generous gift from Esri's founder and president, Jack Dangerman. The Roger Tomlinson Prize for Excellence in GIS is awarded to one undergraduate student and one graduate student in the College of Arts and Sciences each year. The prize is given to students who demonstrate academic excellence in GIS-related classes, demonstrated professional interest in GIS through community service, internships, employment, and other activities, and creative application of geospatial technologies for research, instruction, community service, and other applications. This year's award recipients will receive a cash honorarium of $300, a certificate of award, and their name on a plaque of award winners prominently displayed in Lewis Hall. Oops, I went ahead too far. Anyway, we have Wes Bernardini and Dr. Wes Bernardini, who is the Spatial Studies Minor Director, who will be presenting the undergraduate awards, and Dr. Fong Ren, who is the Director of the Graduate Program in GIS, who will present the graduate award. Wes, can you take it away? I'll stop sharing my screen too. Oh, Wes, we don't hear you.
Sorry. So we had 3 finalists this year for the Undergraduate Tomlinson Award: Andrew Shebley, Akira Hengst, and Mackenzie Nelson. The committee had a difficult job picking a finalist, and we want to congratulate all 3 candidates who did impressive spatial work this year. The winner this year was part of 2 impressive projects, one of which we heard about earlier today, mapping historical census data in the Inland Empire with Dr. Jennifer Tilton. And the other was a solo project, her GIS capstone, which studied air quality in Southern California, and in particular highlighted racial inequalities in exposure to airborne pollutants. So please join me in congratulating the 2021 Undergraduate Tomlinson winner, Mackenzie Nelson. Congratulations, Mackenzie. And now I will turn it over to Fong to introduce the winner of the Graduate Tomlinson Award.
Thank you, Wes. I'm very glad to announce the graduate recipient of Tomlinson Prize for Excellence in GIS, Aubriana Kinghorn. Aubrey is a second-year graduate student from the MSGS program and also a product engineer at Esri. Aubrey received her Bachelor of Science in Geography with an emphasis in GIS from BYU, where she served as a Vice President of Geography Club and a teaching assistant to help promote geographical awareness and spatial curiosity across campus. Between 2015 and 2017, Aubrey took a GIS internship at the Sandia National Labs, creating maps and databases for different environmental applications. After graduation, Aubrey joined ArcGIS Pro Layout team at Esri. She designs, tests, and documents new functionality for ArcGIS Pro layouts. She has been working on a variety of different applications in the project. She also worked with GIS users across the world and in a variety of industries to help them understand how quality map layouts can tell stories in a better way. At the university, Aubrey continues to excel in her academic work. She shows excellent GIS skills, great passion of learning, and excellent citizenship. Besides the coursework, Aubrey is also working on her master's project that focuses on the map legend design to support more comprehensive and useful legend creation tools in GIS software. In her artist blog, Aubrey says, "I love good cartography, good burritos, and helping people figure out effective ways to share their data with others." We are very pleased to see her doing this every day, and we believe she will make a greater contribution to the GIS community in the future. Congratulations, Aubrey. And I know she's here, and if you can, turn on your camera and wave your hands. Yeah, I see you. Okay, congratulations.
Well, congratulations to all winners of awards from the Spatial Business and the Roger Tomlinson Awards. It's wonderful to see the work that students are doing at the university, and it's great to be able to honor them. The choices are very difficult sometimes, and we appreciate the work that everyone is doing here at the university. We're actually ending up this part of the program a little bit early, and I need to allow our keynote presenters to join us. They have not joined the meeting yet, so I'm going to call a break here till we will stay on time. We'll just stay at, we'll start the keynote at 7 p.m. So we'll give you about 10 minutes to step away and get a drink of water or get something to eat. And we'll be back at 7 o'clock to do the keynote address. So hang in here and go look at the posters and story maps at the link that Lisa has shared, and vote for your favorites. We'll be back. Thank you.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah, it seems. Okay, well, we're going to get started here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here after I just introduce the keynote. We have a keynote here by Jim and Tish Sandos and an introduction by Kathy Ogren. I'm going to give it over to Kathy here. Stop sharing my screen. So, Kathy, are you ready to go?
I'm ready to go.
All
Thanks,
right.
Steve. And good evening, everyone. It's a great pleasure for me as the provost of the university to participate, first of all, in the overall event today. Tremendous presentations, lightning talks, awards. It's just been a great pleasure, and I thank you all. It's a particularly great pleasure for me to introduce Jim and Tish. You just saw their bona fides on the slide, so you know that they are great contributors to this community. And what you may not know is that they are longstanding friends and colleagues of mine. Jim chaired the search committee in the history department that brought me to Redlands. The three of us have shared scholarship, teaching, and general interest in the history of the North American West for many years. From co-teaching Western history with Jim, to shared invitations to artists such as poet Paul Zarzycki performing Butte, or artist Tom Ross capturing the visual power of the Little Bighorn, the Battle of the Little Bighorn, to the innovative work on missionization presented here this evening. Ours has been a deeply rewarding shared professional journey, and I'm delighted to do this introduction. When Jim and Tish first explored the advantages of using ArcGIS in order to newly contextualize Jim's extensive work on missionization of California Indians, work that he effectively synthesized in the critically appreciated book, Converting California, Indians and Franciscans in the Missions, which was published in 2004. When he first did that, I remember sitting either at this desk or another one and hearing very preliminary ideas and planning about what was possible. And it's just been terrific to see how this has taken off. Jim and Tish's current project, they are under contract with Oklahoma University Press to complete a book-length project on California Indian violence against the mission system. Because of their deep familiarity with two extremely valuable databases on Native American settlement and missionization, these are records collected by Franciscan missionaries, accessed from the Huntington Library, and through a database collected for Caltrans, Jim and Tish have a very rich trove of material to be able to use for this work. They immediately recognized the advantages of extending their research through ArcGIS, geocoding, and mapping, and they have mapped tribal areas of origin in relation to missions where individuals moved, and using birth, death, marriage, and baptism records, they will be able to share their insights and findings with us in their presentation tonight. Before I turn the virtual podium over to Jim and Tish, I want to speak to the great good fortune of our students. Because Jim and Tish have invited student contributions to this work through the History 376 course, California Indian Seminar. The seminar engages students in research, Excel and ArcGIS data organization and analysis, as well as library research of historic records. Thematically, the students explore tribal entry patterns, Native American accommodation and resistance to missionization, the impact of disease on Native societies, mission disruption of Native American life by gender, and community building within the missions under externally directed social and religious change. This combination of teaching and scholarship is one of the most distinctive qualities, I think, of learning and education at Redlands, and this is a highlight of the diverse spatial studies curriculum that we offer. So please join me in welcoming Jim and Tish as they present California Indians Say No, using spatial analysis to decode Indian resistance to the California Mission Enterprise, missions San Diego 1775 and San Jose 1826.
Thank you, Kathy. And welcome to everybody here. I appreciate your participation.
I lose this?
Okay, you ready to share your screen?
Well, I thought I was. I had it all done.
We've worked all day in recording this, so we hope we got it right.
Okay.
It just suddenly said sign in. Now, wait a minute, I'm doing something dumb.
Should just the share button with the little up arrow at the bottom of the screen there.
All right. Maybe. All right. There's the share. Okay, I think.
And then remember to do the optimize.
No, I know exactly where I'm going. There we go.
You need to share your screen
Okay.
so we can tell you how to share your screen.
There you
go. Okay, but we have optimized text and image, and then we have this.
Okay, I
Steve
see
taught
your
me all
screen.
this.
Oh, I've had to learn it myself.
All right. I think we're ready to go, but Jim, do you want to do your introduction?
We want to represent a story that those interested in the history of California's Franciscan missions believe they know, but that we think is much misunderstood. Our representation involves Indian response to Mission San Diego that in the early years varied from cautious acceptance to outright defiant rejection and ended in an accommodation that fully satisfied neither side of this frontier of religious conflict. While we begin this presentation with setting up the historical context, we promise there will be maps, lots of them, tabular data too.
And we're about to start the pre-recorded presentation, and Steve taught us how to do it today, and I hope we got it right. I think it's a little bit rough, but we're doing our best. And I also want to say that Jim and I debated who was to narrate, and Jim drew the short straw, so he is your narrator, and you're in luck because he has a much better narration voice than I do.
We're not hearing the narration. Did you hearing it on your end?
What?
You might have to reshare.
All right, we will go back to.
And to make sure it's on optimized for video and then make sure they share computer audio. It's checked.
All right.
Worked earlier today.
All right, we should be keep sharing. And we said share. Sorry, everyone. And the trouble is I only see optimized for.
If you click the down, click the optimize.
Oh, there it is. Oh, there
Yeah.
it is. That's what you taught me today, and I didn't.
Yeah,
see it.
there you go.
So
it's
we will
okay.
try
We're
again.
all used to this over the past year.
All right. Let's see. Yes.
The Indians of San Diego received advance word from Indian runners that a group of strange men were approaching their lands. Suddenly, prior to the arrival of the Spaniards, the sky went dark in what we would call a solar eclipse. The eclipse was followed by the shaking of the ground. Shortly thereafter, strange men staggered onto the beach, sick and hungry. Nipro Serra, who arrived later, took the disturbance of the sky, earth, and water as an omen that his enterprise would succeed. We don't know how the Indians interpreted the event, but their response suggested trepidation in the face of this new presence and of the violent reaction of earth and sky to it. The Spanish mission soldiers appeared in the land of the Kumeyaay. The Kumeyaay consisted of two major groups, Tipai speakers south of the San Diego River and Ipai speakers to the north. In the first years of the new mission, problems were beset with hard issues. The original was adjacent to the military presidio. Padre Jaume, senior priest, had urged moving the mission site because of Spanish soldiers' repeated raping of Indian women and continuing crop failure. He wanted a new site further up the river, some distance from the presidio, with a more reliable river flow. The Indians called the new place Nippawai. Jaume's previous complaints against soldier abuse of Indians had been ignored. On the afternoon of November 4th, 1775, neophytes, baptized Indians, from two local rancherias, villages, came to the mission compound to spend the night before attending Mass the next morning. Following dinner, Padre Jaume retired to the priest's room adjacent to the church, and the second priest at the mission, Padre Fuster, retired to the warehouse/granary at the rear of the compound. Also staying at the granary were two boys, the son and the nephew of the recently departed Lieutenant Francisco Ortega, who had taken leave of the mission with half his military escort and two priests to found the new mission of San Juan Capistrano. Ortega left San Diego thinking that all Indians there were peaceful and had accepted Spanish rule. In that thinking, he was incorrect. Sometime after midnight, Tipai Indians from their villages on the south side of San Diego River, organized in two groups, separately approached the presidio and the mission. Apparently, the burning of the presidio would be the signal to the other group to burn the mission and kill its occupants. Instead of the plan unfolding as projected, the group at the mission did not wait for the planned fire at the presidio and instead torched the church. The group at the presidio, seeing the fire below them, chose to go to the mission and attack the Spanish there. A lengthy battle ensued. Following the rebellion, according to the testimonies at the interrogation, Carlos continued to agitate other rancherias to resume the attack. He was eventually arrested and ultimately banished from the mission and sent to Monterey, where he remained until his. The first herds were concentrated in the territories of rebel rancherias up the river from the mission. The resultant environmental disturbance of their tribal lands was likely a driving force in their decision to join the rebels. As the map shows, the herds were pastured in the heart of what would prove to be rebel territory. However, anthropologist Richard Carrico argued environmental degradation by mission herds was unlikely the sole cause of the rebellion. Richard spent years determining the rancheria locations and identifying the rancherias of the region that had rebelled and those which had not, as are shown in this map. From his findings, he concluded the Indians were not united in their rejection of Spanish rule. Southern Kumeyaay, Tipai, committed men from several villages to the attack, but the northern Kumeyaay, Ipai, even though some of the rancherias were close to the mission, had likely been impacted by soldier abuse and the herd introduced degradation of their food sources, declined to participate and literally stayed away from the fight. There were incidents of new disease among the groups. However, the full impact of Spanish-introduced pathogens that plagued much of the mission era were not to be felt for several years. As Richard said, and here we quote, "The formation, organization, and implementation of the 1775 San Diego Revolt followed traditional tribal organization, and the Tipai alone, with no assistance from the Ipai, staged the revolt. It was not some form of an early pan-Indian movement or military excursion. The insurrection was led by a group of Tipai shaman, and rancheria leaders. According to most reports from the era, two brothers, Chisley and Canuch, given the Spanish names of Carlos and Francisco from the nearby rancheria of Cosai, later Nipoy, were the ringleaders. Francisco was a captain of his own rancheria, Cosai, later Nipoy, as well as an important leader in the new commission community. Carlos participated in mission life, but more importantly, held the traditional Indian position Quape, a power broker among the Tipai rancherias. Following the rebellion, according to the testimonies at the interrogation, Carlos continued to agitate other rancherias to resume the attack. He was eventually arrested and ultimately banished from the mission and sent to Monterey, where he remained until. Richard's data, as used in this map, provides critical and well-researched rancheria locations and the identification of rebel rancherias, but it is a static view and does not show the movement of people over time and space. To shed more light on why the Ipai and Tipai did not combine forces to expel the Spanish and to learn more about both the Kumeyaay rancherias and their leaders, we turn to a database of the mission registers created by the Huntington Library containing the information fields we needed to take our research and mapping to a. This is the first page of the Book of Baptisms at Mission San Diego. Mission registers were ledger books kept by Franciscans at all 21 California missions. Each priest was required to record specific information about every baptism, marriage, and burial for which he officiated. The registers for 20 of the 21 missions survive and are an invaluable source for research. For example, with few exceptions, the mission baptism entries include the following information about each individual receiving the sacrament: baptism date, gender and age, parents' names if they're both there, Indian name, rancheria of origin, the new mission's given Spanish name, godparent, the priest's signature with personal rubric, in this case, Padre Junipero Serra himself. In many cases, the priest would also include insightful comments and margin notes. As the example suggests, the biographical and geographical information contained in the mission entries lend themselves to both database analysis and mapping of the baptism entries for October 1st through 4th in 1775, taken from the ECPP database. On these 4 days, 93 Indians accepted baptism, representing nearly 20% of all Indians baptized since the first baptism in 1770. At the time, the priests commented on the spiritual significance of these baptisms, as well as the sudden large increase in baptisms that occurred in the preceding 3 months, as a harbinger of the eventual success of their endeavor. Baptisms, this chart of San Diego baptism from the mission's founding to the rebellion reveals the following. From 1770 through December 1774, 133 individuals had gradually accepted baptism. Then, in July of 1775, 38 individuals from one rancheria were baptized. In August, 106 individuals. In September, an additional 54, representing 2 rancherias. As mentioned earlier, in the first 4 days of October, there were 93 baptisms. To better understand the information presented in this chart, we added Richard's rancheria information to the San Diego portion of the Huntington database. Here are the results. Alert to you. To see the results, we used a different. The Kumeyaay people were slow to accept baptism. Not surprisingly, the first baptized individuals were from the rancherias near the mission, especially from Cosoy and Nipple. In July of 1775, the pattern abruptly changed with the baptism of sizable groups from 4 coastal rancherias, both further north and south of the San Diego River. The most southern rebelled, the 3 to the north did not. Through the end of September, the San Diego baptism map looked like this, with the new summer baptisms outlined in blue. With the addition of red and green outlines to symbolize those rancherias that joined the rebellion and those that did not, the chart begins to look like a calculated game of risk, or for those of you not familiar with this game of world power, a reference to chess with its moves and counter moves works as well. In accepting baptisms, it appears the rancherias were making calculated choices. The response to the summer baptisms appears to come in the October 1st to 4th baptisms. 5 southern inland rancherias entered the mission to accept baptism for the first time, as well as an additional individual from Apuquel on the coast and a large number from Coapan immediately. This final map charts all baptisms prior to attack. The baptisms of July to September coastal rancherias are in blue, and October 1st to 4th, 1775, baptisms of the southern group outlined in green. The map presents an insight into why northern and the southern rancherias did not unite to expel the Spaniards. It also helps answer the question of Las Troyas, the one southern rancheria that did not join the rebellion. In moving up the river, the people of Cosoy, as contemporary documents report, had lost immediate access to the rich resources of Mission Bay. In their absence, coastal rancherias on either side of the river seemed to be jockeying, if not coalescing, to gain control of the newly vacated territory and possibly better access to the material wealth introduced by the Spaniards, including woven cloth, metal tools, and guns. Perhaps they collectively decided it was not in their interest to rebel. Apuquel, the one coastal rancheria to rebel, as the following map shows, likely was part of a different clan. This final map charts. Richard Carrico has given another important insight in his ongoing work to map the traditional clan territories of the Kumeyaay. This clan, outlined in purple, comprised 4 of the rancherias that rebelled and would have been a powerful force for Carlos to connect with in fomenting the rebellion in his role as Quapay, power broker of the region. Apuquel likely stuck with its clan in making its decision to rebel rather than sit it out like the rest of the coastal rancherias to the north and south of the land formerly occupied by Cosoy. The extent to which the rebellion was targeted against the Spanish intrusion versus against the coastal Kumeyaay tribes is difficult to assess and may never be known. However, through mapping, we can see the outlines of social and political change brought about by the Sacred Expedition and have gained powerful insights for further inquiry. As Kumeyaay tribal member Mike Connolly said in a co-presentation with us in San Diego a few years ago, our research reminded him of the old tale about a man losing his keys in the dark and searching for them exclusively under a lamppost. When asked why he didn't look further, he replied, that was where the light was. We will now move years ahead to our second example of how mapping helps to correct false stories of the past comes from the largest mission in Northern California, San Jose, and involves Indians, Franciscans, Mexicans, and an American intruder, Jedediah Smith, a well-known mountain man, fur trader, and trapper. Smith had entered Mexican territory with his party of ethnically and nationally mixed trappers in the late fall of 1826 without seeking or securing Mexican governmental permission. This act makes Smith and his band California's first illegal aliens. The defining moment of the story, Jedediah Smith and Mission San Jose outreach area in 1826-28, just at the point that the Plains Miwok, who had resisted missionization, began to invade the lands vacated by the Yokas. Despite an order delivered to him to leave, Smith and his crew continued to move about, and Smith continued to pursue his own course. On the night of May 26th and the morning of the 27th, 400 Indians, roughly 20% of the mission Indian population, fled Mission San Jose. The senior missionary there, Padre Narciso Duran, claimed that Smith had promised the Indians of the interior that if they fled the mission and worked for him, they could return to their own life ways before the Franciscans appeared and live as they chose before the Spanish world had invaded them. The military commander of the San Francisco Presidio, however, disagreed with Padre Duran and argued that it was an alcalde, Narciso, an elected official, at the mission who had led the Indians out and into the hinterland. Immediately, this story brings to mind the conflict between Franciscans and the military at Mission San Diego 50 years earlier. To try and resolve the issue, Martinez had conducted an interrogation of recently baptized Indians who were in the Tulares and who had comments both about Narciso and Smith. This rare example of recorded Indian testimony was recently discovered and sheds new light on the episode. By using the registers, we could identify every Indian who testified and locate their rancheria on a map. While the testimonies differed on some points, there was concurrence that Narciso was stirring up trouble and that Smith was doing a lot more than just hunting river otter and gathering pelts. Smith was making alliances with tribal people in the interior, urging Indians to leave the mission, gathering military intelligence, and mapping strategic geographic information. Informants also claimed that Narciso conspired along with the neophytes from Mission San Juan Bautista and Santa Clara to leave the missions and make arrows to kill the old Christians. The Olones, the first Indian language group baptized at Mission San Jose. Furthermore, one of the interrogatees reported that he had been sent to Mission San Jose by a Plains Miwok chief to warn the officials that the Americans were coming and were planning to attack the mission. The chief also told him to tell Narciso to lead his people out. When read the charges against him, Narciso replied, "What the people say is a lie." Narciso further testified that Smith had stated, "The land from the mission to the San Joaquin belonged to the Christians and the soldiers, but where the river splits towards the Sierra is all ours, all the way up to the Columbia River in present-day Washington." He added that all the low-lying area, as far as one could see, belonged to them, meaning the Americans. Why would those Indians accuse Narciso of being disloyal to the mission, and what was Smith up to? What did really happen, and who was involved? This is where mapping becomes crucial. American historians of the West found the exploits of people like Jedediah Smith fascinating and began to reconstruct their travels by researching their diaries to chronicle their routes. Smith always denied ever having tried to get the Indians to defect from the mission, but by using the research of later historians, we could plot where Smith was in the mission San Jose outreach area. Located the rancherias of each of those interrogated. We put the locations on the map. We were surprised to see that they were closely clustered in what is now the Central Valley to the east of the San Joaquin River. The base map we used had historic significance. It was provided by the Henry Huntington Library and was originally drawn by hand in the 1870s. It was an irrigation map. The point being not to map existing irrigation infrastructure, but to identify potential locations for water storage, canals, etc. At that time, as you will note, by the gray blotch running down the center of the valley, much of the Central Valley was swampy with wet months. A eureka moment came with the help of Dave Smith. We mapped Jedediah's route. The route ran right by the rancherias of the interrogated. Smith had traveled through every Indian rancheria identified as being contacted by him in his travels. Padre Duran, therefore, proved to be right. Smith was stirring up Indian discontent against the mission to promote his own endeavors. The Indian alcalde, accused by the Presidio Commandant, Narciso, was innocent of wrongdoing, but that left unanswered. Why had the Indians uniformly testified that he was guilty? As mentioned, Narciso was an important member of the mission community. In addition to being an alcalde, he was a musico and a nurse. He was also one of the most active godparents in the mission, standing for hundreds of baptisms, as well as a witness at over 200 weddings. In mapping his baptism activity, we got a clue as to why he was so resented. As a godparent, he was most active in participating in the baptisms for individuals from this very area and was likely resented as being a face of the mission. Finally, in the population graph, we can see that the exodus came at a time of population change in the mission. In 1826, the declining Yokut population was being replaced by Plains Miwok Indians. In addition, as in San Diego, according to many reports, including word from Smith, the Miwoks were moving into traditional Yokut territory. It is quite likely that Narciso did lead the exodus, not to join Smith as charged, but to escape a threat of Miwok attack that had arrived at the mission. Getting the facts straight is essential in good historical research. We have offered you today 2 examples of how a spatial approach can reveal new insights into historical events and correct the historical record for the benefit of all those interested in the past. Look for the slide. Well, we can probably never have a close look at what this neophyte baptized Indian in 1826 was thinking. And standing on his small raft, we think we can come closer by way of a spatial approach. We thank the Center of Spatial Study for their invariable help. And in particular, Steve.
Are we live?
Yes.
Yes, you are. I had to unmute myself. Okay, Jim and Tish.
Yeah, well, we're not through. We're beginning with you, Steve.
Okay. Okay.
Director of the Center for Spatial Studies. Nate Strout, Director of Spatial Technology, Dave Smith, Spatial Instructor Manager, and our really go-to indispensable person, Lisa Benvenuti, the Spatial Resources Manager. She's been at practice. I think she's only missed maybe 2 or 3 of our classes. She's just great, and she's been so incredibly helpful in helping us get our databases together and helping teach learn mapping. So without you folks, we wouldn't have accomplished what we have. And so we're incredibly fortunate, I think, to have the center and the support from Esri that makes this truly a unique place.
Well,
we're happy to take any questions if you have them.
I had one. One thing I'm particularly interested in is how this impacts the students, and how do you think that you teach this incredible class using this data, and the students really get themselves into the original documents and everything. So, what kinds of changes do you see in the students, and what do they struggle with? What do they learn when you teach them this material?
Well, I'll just give an example of one person that I think was transformative. I think it was transformed a few years ago. But at the end of the class, she said, "I finally figured it out. Language matters. What you call someone, what you address them as, really affects the way the world sees them and the way they see themselves." And I said, "Yes, that's absolutely correct. It's good insight." And I mean, just think of the name Indian. Christopher Columbus put that moniker on the people of the Americas. Now, I mean, I don't have a very high opinion of him anyway, but he'd been to the court of Lisbon trying to get funded for his desire to go to India. And he'd seen Indians. He knew what Indians looked like, how they talked, what they were, he knew all kinds of things about Indians. But when he gets to but in order to get his funding, which he gets from Spain, to go find this route to the Indies, what does he do? As soon as he makes landfall, he looks around and says, "Hey, these are Indians." And so we get that too. So there we get this confusion between the East Indians, the original Indians, and the people so misnamed by Columbus in his various different voyages.
And I jump in here, going to the student response. Most of the students, if they went through California history, know that the mission project of the 4th grade is build a mission. And of course, the kids love it. They love to build things, and they can put in little fountains and all kinds of things. And they have cattle, and they put in trees, and they make roof tiles. Jimmy, when he was in the 4th grade, made roof tiles out of pistachios.
Red pistachios.
Red pistachios. But you could understand the teachers, the story of the missions is so difficult to tell that it is easier to default to a building project than to get into the story. And as Steve well knows, we came to the idea that if we could get students to research the database, they could unravel stories of individual Indians, just as we've done, and get closer to who were the people who lived in the missions, who built them, and sadly, so many of them died. And as the students get in, I'll never forget one student who had researched a very active godparent, and she turned to us and said, "I wish I had a picture of her." And I think that is what, in addition to getting closer to who the Indians actually might have been, they also really are taken by being able to map them and combining the combination of Jim's documentary History Past with now let's put it on the map, and going back and forth has been a very exciting project. And as Lisa knows, who stays with us, most of the students stay for a full hour of the class to continue their projects.
Yeah, I've never seen that before. Very, very consistently.
And the final projects, starting from people who are struggling with the database, struggling with the mapping, struggling with the concepts, for the most part, are very, very good. And we had a student, in fact, it was interesting, he struggled with the database, and he finally got to tell his story using a story map. And he became fluent.
Yeah.
And received an A+. Do you have any other questions about our stories?
Questions from the audience?
I did have one question. It's not exactly about the story. It's about something you said earlier about words being important. And I just want to preface this that I am a citizen of the Chickasaw Nation, and I'm not trying to, say anything, because what they say is all over the place. But if you don't like the word Indian, what was the particular reason for using it in this context?
Because it's become part of the literature, part of the understanding of the West, the cowboys and Indians. It's all of this stuff that just gets passed around, and it's all done by a man who's looking to make money, and he makes money if he can prove to the king that he's found a path to India and the potential riches that they're from. So it's one of those things. What are you going to do? Are you going to call them Native Americans? Well, yeah, that's a good word or a good pair of words, but that's not what sticks. What's stuck is the guy getting his money. It's ka-ching, ka-ching.
And we've asked many of our Indian friends, what would you prefer us to call you? Help us. And they say, just call us Indians, it's easier. Personally, I wish we could get rid of it. And Native Americans is a little strange too, because a Native American is really someone who is born in the place. So I suppose I'm a Native American. I go back about 6 generations. I like the term used in Canada, First People. I wish that were the word that we used. I think that's the most accurate. But it's not widely known. Just as when we talk about the Indians, particularly in the baptisms, we'd rather use their Indian name, as we did with Carlos Chisley and Canoosh.
Yeah, Chisley and Canoosh.
The difficulty when you write about it is in the literature, they're always referred to by the Spanish name. And pretty soon you start writing a Russian novel if you got so many names in there. But it's very difficult.
Yeah.
I had a question. It's John. Nice to see you both.
Hi, John.
How are you, John?
Talk, as always. Good, thank you. I noticed on the San Diego map, the rancheria, I think it's called Las Choyas, seems to have been surrounded by other rancherias that revolted, but it didn't. The only thing I noticed on the map was that it converted earlier than those other ones. Was that the reason why it didn't revolt, or was there something else going on?
No, what that, if I screen share again, can I show a slide? Does that work?
Steve?
Yes, sorry, I was muted.
Oh, okay. Wait a minute now. Share, there we are, back to share. I'm getting to understand what I'm doing. This is amazing.
Yeah, WebEx star.
I'll get it, I usually do. Because this, yeah, but I want to go up to the blue map.
I think it might have been number 23.
That's exactly what I want to show.
Yeah.
It was this moment when we did this mapping and saw these rancherias were the rancherias that entered together right during between July and September, the ones outlined in blue.
Right.
Okay, well, because Las Choyas is the one that always stands out and everyone says, why? What happened with Las Choyas? We believe it was the self-interest of these 3 rancherias that overcame their clanal identifications in the interest of taking over this little valuable piece of land that the people of Kasoy had vacated when they moved to Nipuai.
Oh, okay.
And we think that's what we're getting at. We think a new alliance was built right here.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
This is what mapping had said, like particularly Estagua, that's the one that came in August, 106, all of a sudden. I mean, these were the rancherias that suddenly poured in. And then you get these rancherias on those 4 days, and we see a power struggle lining up. And it could very well, there are many aspects, but we think one aspect very well could have been getting access to what's probably the most valuable part of San Diego area, Mission Bay. I mean, think of all the resources, not only food, but shells for money. So that is our reason, our argument. And that is the new finding of the map. Because everyone's always debated it. I think with Abasquel, it's probably more of, I mean, it's hard to know, but Abasquel was part of this clan. So perhaps the clan allegiance was more powerful than the coastal allegiance, because you sort of say, okay, look, La Choya's no, Abasquel yes. You're making the argument of the coastal rancheries, but what about Abasquel? We're guessing that the clan affiliation overrode the coastal.
Yeah.
Right.
But we had never seen it like this until we put it on the map and did it year by year to see where the baptisms were, accumulated the baptisms.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Additional questions?
Yeah.
Jim, are you planning to teach this class again?
I have no idea. It's I don't know where we stand with the LAIs, and you know, whether the department is, you know, the financial exigencies that all departments of the university have faced this year. You know, who knows?
We're waiting to hear.
All right, well, thank you very much, Jim and Tish, for presenting your work and getting your recording done and figuring out WebEx so that you could come here and share it with us tonight. I really appreciate all the time that you put into this. And I've always valued our interactions and collaborations. And I'm so happy that the center has played a role in advancing your work. It's just really rewarding to me. Thank you.
And I personally, oh, excuse me.
No, go ahead.
I just wanted to personally, I think Lisa's somewhere in the audience. Lisa has spent so many hours helping me massage this data and figure it out and figuring out how we were going to accumulate the baptisms and get it to all work. And I just want to say thank you, Lisa, wherever you are.
You are most welcome.
There you go. I'm glad you showed yourself tonight. Because you've been lurking in the background this whole process, and I'm going to get to that in a minute. Well, I'm going to give you my applause here with the only way I can. Well, I can applaud, but I'll do it that way. If you guys could let go of the screen, I'm going to present just a couple more slides here. And we're going to wrap up the show tonight a little bit early, probably. So there you go. You learned how to share your screen, how to stop sharing. You know, it's just amazing. Tonight was a good testament to how far we've come in a year, because if we had tried this symposium a year ago virtually, it would have been a mess, because none of us would have been as familiar with these tools as we've become in the past year. And now we're kind of living by them. And when we all get back together face to face, we'll probably lose this knowledge that we've gained over the past year. I'm going to just do some thank yous here. So I'm going to get my screen shared, and then let's see, there it goes. I think it's shared right now. Yeah, you see the thanks. So I want to thank all the meeting talk, and the poster, and the story map presenters. I thank Addie for making an appearance, and Mary Littlejohn for making that possible. Shelley Stockton helped us get the word out. So we have a great deal of gratitude towards alumni and community relations. Jim Pick, Avijit Sarkar, Fong Ren, and Wes Bernardini for doing the awards program. Kathy for spending so much time with us today. I'm really happy to see you sit in on all the presentations tonight. And Jim and Tish, once again, for sharing your work with us. Sarah Griffin for communications has really done a lot of help with us in formulating our gallery and getting things presented in a nice way. And then we have the CSS staff, Nate Strout, the Director of Spatial Technology, and David Smith, the Spatial Instruction Manager, have been making all this possible also. And then ITS, I want to give a shout out to ITS. We were able to arrange the live stream the Facebook at the last minute, and like usual, ITS came through, and we've all been helped out here and got the word out that way. Also, I want to give special thanks to Lisa, because Lisa did a lot of the groundwork for this symposium and got things organized. She worked on getting the gallery up, and she's been the potent force behind our symposium happening for the past few years. I want her to take a round of applause for her work and helping out with this effort. And I will live clap for that one. So
Thank you.
We're down at the end of the symposium here, and the voting has concluded. I think our election has been cleaner. Well, the cleanest in history. It's been all electronic and digital, even though there are opportunities for sly voting. We noticed today that our form not only allows you to vote, and then it says submit another response right at the bottom of the ballot. So this is old time voting, where you can just keep turning out votes if you want to. We're going to pick a favorite poster and a favorite story map. The winners of this voting effort today are going to win an Esri book that was just released in December 2020, GIS for Science, Volume 2. And I will get the information from the winners on how to ship this out to them. The books are being shipped to me by our friend Christian Harder at Esri Press, and we will have them out to you as soon as I can make the transfer and get them packed up and shipped out. So the winners, I'm going to take a look at the voting. This is actually our detailed voting block here, and there was a very clear winner in the poster category. This red block here took almost 50% of the 147 votes that were cast. Actually 52% took a majority, more than a majority of the votes by Jinye Wang. And I will show the poster in just a second. And then there was a much closer race in the story map category, with Tanner Chapman's story map just squeaking by with 45% of the vote to the 43% from Jinye's story map version of that work. So I want to congratulate the winners here. Jinye's poster is taking the prize tonight for favorite, and then Tanner's Wildfires and Urban Development story map will be taking the other prize tonight. So I congratulate both winners of our first ever contest along these lines. Back to my very basic PowerPoint presentation here, and just end up the symposium by thanking everybody for hanging in for the event. It went as well as I could have imagined, and I'm really happy with all of the presentations and the awards that we've given out today, and then the keynote talk. I appreciate your efforts, and I look forward to having this symposium next year, hopefully in person with a virtual component, because I think reaching out virtually has extended our range nationally and internationally, and I'd like to keep that part of it going. It's been an incredible year of learning and grief and experience that we've all gone through. It's so wonderful to see GIS being used in the way it's used at the University of Redlands, and all the work of uncovery that's being done to uncover new knowledge and new understandings. So thanks again for being here. And I'm so happy that you came tonight and shared this event with us. Good night, and I wish you the best. Please take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.